Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is the legendary Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, directed by Nicholas Webster. Before I begin, let me make a few adjustments. Since this is the first color film we've ever shown on Cleveland Classic Cinema, and it is Christmas time, let's do this right. There, that's better. I gotta tell you, I live for showing movies like this. Most people go out of their way to avoid watching films like the one we're presenting tonight. But if you're watching this intro, you're not one of them. There's a sort of perverse pleasure in watching bad movies. I think, for me at least, it satisfies whatever masochistic streak I may possess without the fuss and expense of buying rubber clothing. But it's a pleasure of such universal appeal that just about everyone can participate. I love movies, but talking about them with other people can be a struggle sometimes. I intensely dislike discussing things like symbolism and what the director really meant when he chose a close-up instead of a medium shot or stuff like that. I don't like art films. The charms of Ingmar Bergman are lost on me, for example, because I want to watch movies to be entertained, not to have a stick thrust in my brain and have the gray matter stirred around. I don't have orgasmic reactions to lockdown shots held for 20 minutes because the director wanted to put across the hopelessness of life or something like that. When I watch a movie, I want to laugh or cry or be scared or be thrilled, to be reminded what a great thing falling in love is, or be inspired by the strength of the human spirit. Barring those reactions, I'm perfectly happy to sit back, point at the screen, and jeer at the incompetence on display. See, it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to be entertained no matter how it's done. Of course, even I have standards. If I could personally destroy every copy of like Jan de Bont's remake of The Haunting or Roland Emmerich's The Day After Tomorrow, I do it gladly simply for the advancement of the human race. There are different kinds of bad movies. There are the ones you can howl at, like the one we're showing tonight, and there are, as I believe I've pointed out before, dull ones. The dull ones are the ones you watch for 5 or 10 minutes, throw your hands up in exasperation, and then flip over to Find a Date or something like that. The other ones are the ones you stumble across while channel flipping, and they reach out and just throttle you with their wretchedness. Ones that stupefy you into watching them. I love those ones. I remember when I was a kid watching Captain Penny and seeing commercials for this movie. I believe it ran in rotation with the commercials for the Little Red Riding Hood movie. If you're my age, 38, you'll remember at least a part of that one. The part where the wolf goes, "All the better to eat you with," Rah! And he leaps at the camera and he ended up looking down his throat. These movies, usually Spanish or Mexican imports presented by K. Gordon Murray, were released using four-walling, which I talked about in the intro to Maniac. The distributors would rent the theater outright for a weekend or so and show matinees for the kiddies. This particular one understandably popped up during the Christmas season, and only for 1 week or less, since if word of mouth about the film got out, nobody would show up. Children are notoriously easy to entertain, however, and since it was Christmas season, parents would always leap at an opportunity to get rid of the kids for a couple hours so they could go Christmas shopping. Kids can be incredibly forgiving when it comes to bad movies, and to the filmmaker's credit, this movie was written and directed with kids in mind. The story is simplistic, the acting is semi-competent for what it is, and the movie has a happy ending, as a Christmas movie should. For an adult, however, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is a lot like a fruitcake that nobody wants to eat and gets passed from hand to hand every year. It's definitely a Christmas thing, but nobody really wants it. Reportedly shot in an abandoned airplane hangar in Long Island, the budget for this movie was estimated at $200,000 by the Internet Movie Database, and if that's true, then it must have made a ton of money. Since no low-budget movie is complete without stock footage, there's plenty of it in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. When the military scrambles after the Martians, mostly planes getting ready to take off and rockets firing and stuff like that. You have to hand it to the production and costume designers. It looks like they were given like about $1,000 and $500 respectively and told to do their best. They keep true to the vision of the script and that the Martians have antennae, wear their underwear on the outside and everything. But the weapons, I think, are the best touch of all. Honest to God, Wham-O air blasters. Before I go on, let me tell you a bit about the Wham-O company. In 1948, two college students named Arthur Spud Mellon and Richard Kerr got the idea to sell falcons for a living. To train them to dive for prey, they used a homemade slingshot to shoot meatballs into the air for the falcons to intercept. While on a sales call, the kid considering buying a falcon decided against it, but said he'd sure like to get one of those slingshots. Knowing a good idea when they heard one, they bought a table saw from Sears on credit and began manufacturing slingshots in Kerr's garage. They called them Wham-O slingshots because, as Kerr recalled later, that's the feeling you got when you hit something with them. The slingshots sold well, and they began to spin off into crossbows and boomerangs, enjoying modest success. In 1955, they met a man named Fred Morrison, who had invented a disc he dubbed the Pluto Platter. Deciding to rename it, they came up with the name Frisbee, which, as legend has it, was inspired by the fact that when they were in college, they used to throw pie plates made by the Frisbee Pie Company for sport. After being introduced at Eastern universities in 1957, they went national and sold several million. On a trip to Australia, Kerr noticed children spinning hoops around their waist in gym class and got the idea for the hula hoop, which became an incredibly successful fad in 1958. By the end of the year, the fad had died out and Wham-O was stuck with several million hoops that they couldn't give away. A little while later, they got the idea to add a number of dried peas to the inside of the hoop, rechristening the product as the Shoop Shoop Hula Hoop. In the early 60s, a chemical engineer named Norman Stingley accidentally invented a plastic that bounced uncontrollably when dropped and offered it to Wham-O, who turned it into the Super Ball, which was followed by the Super Gold Ball, the Super Baseball, and Super Dice. Other insane toys followed, like the Slip and Slide, the Monster Magnet, the Wham-O Wheelie Bar, Super Elastic Bubble Plastic, the Water Wiggle, which was a soft rubber hose with a U-shaped high-pressure nozzle on the end and a plastic housing. We had one of those things, and it beat the crap out of you when you turned on the hose. In fact, I think my oldest brother John still has bruises from it. And, of course, the Wham-O Air Blaster. The Air Blaster came in two forms, a big pistol and a bigger bazooka-like toy. And what you do is pump it up, and it would blast a ball of air out of the end with, as I recall, a popping sound. It was a harmless but absolutely bizarre toy and could completely freak out an unwary playmate very satisfactorily. John Call, who plays Santa, was born on November 3, 1908 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He appeared in 14 movies, starting with an uncredited role in 1951's Iron Man. He played small roles throughout his career, his largest probably being this one. I'm not quite sure how to say this, so I'll just say it. His performance as Santa is a bit creepy. There's an undertone in his performance that makes me think that when he's ho-ho-hoing, he's reaching for a machete that's just off screen. That's the feeling I get, anyway. His last film was 1971's The Anderson Tapes with Sean Connery. He died on April 3, 1973 in New York City. A personal aside here. John Call's performance as Santa reminds me of going up to Halley's 7th floor when I was 7 years old or so to see Mr. Jingling. And I'm certain that any mental problems I have at the present can be traced back to that. I never really cared for Mr. Jingling. I always thought he was kind of scary. And what I experienced when I went to see him didn't help my view. Now this could be completely wrong, but this is what I remember. After standing in line for however long we did, we were sent one by one down a very long, nearly completely dark, narrow hallway. And about 4/5 of the way down, Mr. Jingling popped out of the wall, thrust a large cardboard key into my hand, and then disappeared into the darkness again. This was about as much fun as opening a closet in a dark room and having a clown with an axe in his hand pop out of it. Vincent Beck, who appears in this movie as Voldar, was born on August 15, 1924. He appeared in 15 movies over the course of his career, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians being his first. His television career was much more successful, as he appeared in more than 30 shows, usually playing a Russian. He died on July 24, 1984 in New York City. To tell you the truth, there are only two actors in this movie that you're going to recognize, and one of them you'll only recognize by name. Bill McCutcheon was born on May 23, 1924 in Russell, Kentucky. His first movie was Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, just like most of the cast, but he went on to a very long and successful career in movies, commercials, and television. He's one of those character actors that you recognize immediately but never know the name of. And he'll be remembered by some of our viewers for playing Uncle Wally on Sesame Street. And others will remember him as Owen Jenkins, Weeze's suitor in 1989's Steel Magnolias. He received a Best Actor Tony for his performance in the revival of Anything Goes on Broadway. His last film was 1990's Mr. Destiny with Jim Belushi. Bill McCutcheon died of natural causes on January 9, 2002 in Ridgeway, New Jersey. The other name that you'll recognize in this movie belongs to the child who plays the Martian girl, Gurmar. Pia Zadora was born on May 4, 1954 in Hoboken, New Jersey. This was her first movie, and she didn't really come into the public eye until her fourth movie, 1981's Butterfly, for which she won a very controversial Golden Globe Award as the Best New Star of the Year, in spite of starting her acting career 18 years earlier. It was rumored that her very wealthy then-husband, corporate raider Meshulam Riklis, bribed the critics casting the votes to give his wife the award. Whatever her problems may be, you can see modesty isn't among them. I heard a rumor that when she appeared on stage right here in Cleveland in The Diary of Anne Frank playing the title role, her performance was so inept that when the Nazis came into the house at the beginning of the second act, upending furniture and demanding, "Where is she? Where's Anne Frank?" just about the whole audience yelled, "She's in the attic!" She continued acting for several years and eventually found success as a singer. I've heard her sing, and she can really belt out a tune. She now works mostly in Las Vegas. By the way, the actor that plays Stobo and looks a lot like Jamie Farr, it's not him. It's actually another guy named Al Nisser. There are several things in this movie you should pay particular attention to, such as the polar bear that menaces Billy and Betty when they get to the North Pole, the robot that looks too cheap for even Robot Monster, and especially the sub-headlines on the newspaper announcing Santa's kidnapping. A familiar cliche in films, the newspaper spinning out in middle distance with huge headlines trumpeting whatever is going on in the movie, is not really supposed to be looked at too closely. I mean, you're supposed to read the headlines, but you're supposed to stop there. My good friend Scott and I, however, like to read the headlines for the lesser stories, the ones just above the fold. There wasn't a lot of attention paid to these details, so more often than not, you'll notice that the sub-headlines will read "Panic in New York," "Menagerie Breaks Loose," or "Building Code Under Fire." Now, I know some of you out there have been waiting patiently for me to tear this movie apart, and I consider doing just that. But it is the Christmas season after all, and we're supposed to be charitable, so I'm not going to give in to the absolutely unbelievable urge. I have to tell you that this movie sucked! Everything about it, from the lousy acting, to the disgusting costuming, to the second-grade play sets, to the idiotic dialogue of the stupid plot, made me want to tear my eyes out and stamp on them until they popped. God, I feel so much better now. I think I need a cigarette. Anyway, there is something else I would like to talk about. There's somebody I want to thank, and that's you. When Henry first got in contact with me about doing this show, I was hesitant, to say the least. First of all, I don't consider myself an actor in any way, shape, or form. Secondly, I don't consider myself anything special to look at. I hate the way I look on camera, and although I've gotten used to hearing it after 2 years of editing this show, I think my voice is terrible. Thirdly, just once, I'd like to have a good hair day when I shoot one of these things. And fourthly, I think the lighting could be a little more flattering. I don't really have a divot here on the side of my head, but you wouldn't know it to look at me now, would you? I had a slight argument with Henry about appearing on camera due to the concerns I've just enumerated, but he eventually brought me around to his way of thinking. It took me a little while to settle into the groove of doing this, but I think I have a pretty good handle on it now. If the unthinkable happens and all of the movies I've introed are shown back to back, I think you not only see me getting more relaxed on camera, but you'd also see the refinements and adjustments I made to the editing process involved in this show. I'm fairly comfortable with the way the show is now, but it was a long road getting here. Something that's helped me along that road was the really delightful encouragement I've received from you, the people that watch the show on a regular basis. I know I tend to bitch about the lack of email I get, but what I do get is wonderful. Apart from a correction from a Star Trek fan regarding the intro for Dimension 13, the messages are just so encouraging, and when I meet my viewers, which isn't often, unfortunately, they're so nice and enthusiastic about the show, I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem enough, but it's all I have. So thank you. Thank you so much. Anyway, the time has come for me to say something sappy about the holidays, and I can tell it's not going to be any easier than it was last year. Heartwarming isn't something I do very well. If you want to see something that'll make you cry, watch the movie after this intro. Actually, as awful as this movie is, it does kind of hold a special place in my heart. As I said before, I remember seeing the commercials for this movie run on Captain Penny, and that in turn reminds me of how excited I'd get every Christmas time. Looking back on it, I realized that I actually got a bit kooky every year around December 20th or so. Searching the house for Christmas gifts is something every kid does, but the way I did it was like borderline psychotic. After a while, my parents gave up on hiding things and just wrapped them as soon as they got home. That didn't stop me, though. I'd partially unwrap them and try to see what was under the paper without tearing it, which was just about impossible. I could never get to sleep on Christmas Eve, and finally, out of desperation, my mother, and she'll deny doing this, would give me like a half or quarter dose of Valium on my third trip down the stairs before sending me back up to bed. And if you think that didn't knock my ass out for the rest of the night, whew, you could have set off a hand grenade next to my bed and I wouldn't have missed a wink. But when I stop and think about the times I wasn't in a drug-induced stupor, just kidding, Mom, it brings back some really great memories. Like the excitement of getting the Christmas catalog from Sears or getting all dressed up to go downtown and look at the magnificent displays in the windows with all the little mechanical elves and stuff. That part of Christmas is gone now, but it's a part I'll never forget. So do yourself a favor. If you got any old home movies of that time, pull them out and watch them. Just watch them by yourself. And remember what it was like to be a kid at Christmas. Well, right now it's time to screw up those happy memories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema. Merry Christmas, everybody.